Well, good morning to everyone and welcome to our National Society Colonial Dames of America Miami Town Committee annual fundraiser. Welcome. Today we are all going to be meeting Commodore Ralph Munroe, an early settler of Coconut Grove, a yacht designer, and a naturalist. The home he built in Coconut Grove, known as the Barnacle, is now a state park. And I know many of you have enjoyed the beautiful grounds overlooking Biscayne Bay and walked through his home, engineered by the Commodore to stay cool before air conditioning was invented. If you have attended one of our fundraising events in the past, you know that Robert Dawson's reenactments are a real treat. We normally gather in person, as you can see from this slide. However, the Omicron variant was raging in January when plans had to be made, so the committee decided to continue this popular event virtually as a free Friendsgiving event. We did the same thing last year. So thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. And by the way, stay to the very end because we have some special door prizes to give away before closing the webinar today. Even a virtual event takes a lot of work. And I really want to thank the committee this is our door prize, so just stay on, that'll be fun. But I just wanted to let you know that I wanted to thank the committee that has worked so hard to make this possible. And as you can see, there are many people that have put in a lot of effort, but I especially want to thank Anna Ellert, who's our chair. You won't see her today, but she's behind the scenes and she really coordinated all of this. And then another person you probably won't see, but boy, she's so important, is our Miami Dame, Sarah Gerber, who's handling the technical aspects of this from behind the scenes, along with Tucker, who's with the NSCDA National Headquarters in Washington, D.C. So thank you to all the committee for making this possible. While the event is free, it is still a fundraiser for two important projects that we have in our town committee. The donations we receive will go to providing care packages to deployed military personnel and supporting NSCDA historic homes. And today we're featuring Sulgrave Manor. You'll hear more about both of these in a few minutes. Next to speak is Jane Arnold, who is our president of the National Society Colonial Dames of America in the state of Florida. So thank you, Jane, for joining us from Jacksonville.
Thank you, Denise. Welcome to everyone. NSCDA was formed in 1891 by Caroline Mays Brevard. Our mission statement, the Society of the Colonial Dames of America in the state of Florida actively promotes an appreciation of our national heritage through historic preservation, patriotic service, and educational opportunities. The Jimenez Facio House Museum, which was built of native coquina around 1798, is located in St. Augustine. The Florida Society purchased the house in 1939 from a Louisa Facio heir and has been restored to depict an early 19th century inn where every room has a story. The house is owned and operated by the Colonial Dames and is on the National Register and is a Florida Heritage Landmark. We hope that you will come visit the museum, the Jimenez Facio House Museum in St. Augustine soon. Thank you so much.
Hello, I am Lucy Hannaford, the committee chairman for Sulgrave Manor, George Washington's ancestral home. In 1924, an endowment fund began by the National Society of the Colonial Dames of America that assists in the maintenance of Sulgrave Manor. Now, please enjoy this wonderful video that we will show you of what is happening at Sulgrave now.
Sulgrave Manor, the home of George Washington's ancestors, set amid the beautiful rolling hills of South Northamptonshire in the English Midlands. A place to explore, a place to make discoveries, and a place to enjoy. Sulgrave Manor is a stunning example of a Tudor home brought to life through painstaking detail of period furniture and artifacts. The property's evolution through the centuries gives a rich insight into the changing fortunes of the landed gentry and a clue to the manor's unique place in history. Nowhere is the special relationship between Britain and the United States more evident, because in many ways this is where it all began. Discover how Lawrence Washington lived and how fate led his descendants to choose a new life across the Atlantic. Our schools program gets students of all ages involved with a living history through drama, music, games and role play. Group visits and private tours can be pre-booked for any day of the week, with plenty of time to enjoy Sulgrave's unique and friendly atmosphere. A site of such historic importance, Sulgrave Manor has been included on World Monuments Fund watch list, an international collection of endangered heritage sites. Visit our website for opening times and to book a tour for your group or school. We look forward to welcoming you to Sulgrave Manor.
Thank you, Jane, for explaining our organization, and to Lucy for the information and video on Sulgrave Manor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Phyllis Parsons, the Patriotic Service Chairman of the Miami Town Committee. As you all know, many countries of the world are experiencing unstable situations at this time. The United States military has never been a more vital force in keeping world peace and in giving humanitarian aid to those who are experiencing disasters. We have men and women in our Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, National Guard, Coast Guard, and intelligence agencies serving in many dangerous areas of the world. More than 160,000 active duty personnel are deployed to more than 150 countries, which make up 75% of the world's nations. I don't think we stop to realize how much these men and women affect our lives. Each member joins voluntarily and takes an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and will obey orders of the President of the United States. These men and women make daily sacrifices to keep us safe. Today, we're raising funds to support these heroes by sending them cards and care packages to let them know of our grateful appreciation for what they're doing. We pack large flat rate boxes with as many useful items and non-perishable snacks as possible. The cost of one box is more than $70. Last year, we sent around 100 boxes to soldiers and 150 cards to the women's clinic at the VA hospital. Following last summer's earthquake in Haiti, we learned through the chaplain's office at the Special Operations Command Center based in Homestead, Florida, that soldiers had been deployed with only a few minutes' notice. They had to leave without time to even pack a toothbrush. They worked tirelessly for hours in the scorching sun with only MREs to eat. We acted quickly and sent toiletries and snacks to them. Your donation will ensure our ability to carry on our mission this year. It's so heartwarming to receive letters and pictures and emails from our recipients. I would like to share with you a video now from a soldier, Dan, who's currently deployed in an undisclosed location and who recently received some of our boxes. Please enjoy this video and it will surely speak to your heart.
Good afternoon. My name is Chaplain J.R. Lorenzen, the Command Chaplain for Special Operations Command South, a joint command that has members of every branch of our military, Army, Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard, and Marines. We want to take a moment to give a special thanks to the Colonial Dames of Miami and to you, their financial supporters that makes their ministry possible. One such ministry took place in August and September of 2021, when we were activated to go down and support the humanitarian aid and disaster relief for the island nation of Haiti that has suffered a 7.2 magnitude. The Colonial Danes very quickly mustered together care packages that include hygiene items, comfort items, and even socks that enabled our service members to continue 24-hour operations in service to the disaster and the people of Haiti. I want to thank you, and in the words of the Army Chaplain Corps, pro Deo et patria, for God and country. Thank you for your service to God and to country that allows me to minister to our service members. God bless you.
Good morning. I am Edith Stickney and a member of the Miami Town Committee. It is a great privilege and a pleasure to introduce to you today the great Robert Dawson as Commodore Ralph Munroe. Enjoy.
Good day to you. I am Commodore Ralph Munroe, Ralph Middleton Munroe, and Commodore because I was the Commodore of the Biscayne Bay Yacht Club, the first ever, and I held that position for 22 years. I was one of the early settlers of the area that is known as Coconut Grove in South Florida. And I was by profession, I was a yacht and boat designer. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Let me demonstrate for you while we have it here. There. This is what I did for a living. This is how I made my living. I designed sailboats and yachts, essentially. And this is one of them. This is what I designed for Biscayne Bay. It's called a Sharpie. And they were shallow drafted because of Biscayne Bay. They were two-masted, easy to run, easy to sail. And they were perfect for the waters, the coastal waters of not only Florida, but more specifically to the Biscayne Bay area. They were swift, they were sound, and this was one of my favorite designs from past years. So let us begin. I already told you, my name is Commodore Ralph M. Middleton Munroe, and Coconut Grove and Biscayne Bay was the area that I both loved and where I lived for a great deal of time. Coconut Grove has changed immensely over the years, but I was blessed to know her when she was almost untouched wilderness. When she was also home to a handful of wayward travelers, rugged individuals. She would retain her beauty, but some of her charm was sacrificed in the name of progress. In 1930, I would publish a book entitled The Commodore's Story, revealing details of my life, those early times, and the impact of Coconut Grove and Biscayne Bay upon my family and the people who shared a vision. This was the book that I wrote, The Commodore's Story. I was assisted in the writing by Vincent Gilpin, who was a lifelong friend and a fine writer in his own way. I wore many hats in my lifetime, but from a young age back in Staten Island, I was drawn to the sea and sailing. I would become a yacht and boat designer, as I showed you previously, a sailor, an avid photographer, a naturalist, which one would often become when one lived in the Coconut Grove area. I was an author, limited. I was an accomplished builder. Many of the skills that I used in building boats turned out to be very, very handy when it came to building residences and hotels and such in the Coconut Grove area. I mentioned earlier also, I was the first Commodore of the Biscayne Bay Yacht Club. It says for 20 years there, but it was actually for over 22 years. And the title Commodore, even after I ceased being the Commodore of the Yacht Club, the title became a nickname and it stuck. I was born April the 3rd in the year 1851, the son of Thomas and Ellen Middleton Munroe. My birthplace was New York City. It was on 22nd Street near 4th Avenue. Now, you may think when I say that I was born in New York City that I was a cityfied sort of fellow, but when I grew up there, farmland was only a few blocks away from us, so it wasn't the city that you may know nowadays. I had two sisters, Minnie and Ellen. My father was a successful businessman, but that would change with time. This is a photograph of my mother. She had hopes that I would grow up to be president of the United States. Strangely, I think that I disappointed my mother in that respect. I, who would eventually become a boat designer and a photographer, as a photographer, oddly enough, I have no pictures of my father. I do, however, have a picture of my grandfather, William Munroe, who famously created the first American wooden lead pencils in the year 1812. Our family would move to Clifton, Staten Island in 1854. Growing up near the sea, I became fascinated at an early age with boats and all things maritime. The New York Yacht Club held the first America's Cup race on August the 8th, 1870, with the British yacht Cambria racing against 14 American yachts. The American schooner Magic won that race, and I got to witness the victory. It was beautiful. It was magnificent. It was a sweet victory for America. The Cambria, by the way, the British yacht that challenged us came in 10th out of 14 and 15 altogether. And the yacht that the America's Cup takes its name from, when it first competed, it competed against the British in England, and it was called the 100 Guinea race. And it was a race around the Isle of Wight. And oddly enough, the American vessel America took the prize. Eventually, the cup would then come to America, and the yacht America went through many changes. Shortly after winning the race, it would be purchased by an Irishman. He would eventually sell it during the Civil War to the Confederate States. They used it as a blockade runner because of its swiftness. When it was in a port down south, it was surrounded by Yankee vessels, and to prevent it being taken by the Yankees, the Confederates sank the yacht America, so it couldn't be taken. The Yanks would bring it up. They would bring it up, they would restore it, and it would race again. And like I said, in this first America's Cup race in America, it came in 4th. The race took its name from the America, but it only came in 4th this time. But then again, how many yachts that have been submerged and sunk and restored, race as well as they did originally. While attending the Eagleswood Military Academy near Perth Amboy, New Jersey, I would purchase my first boat. It was a skiff, a dory, if you want a fancy word for it, a rowboat, which is far more mundane. I, nevertheless, despite its low esteem in the world, I would name my first vessel Hornet, and I would have its name emblazoned across the stern. Yes, it had oars, no sails, and it leaked like a sieve. Then again, I paid all of $2 for it. One day, while out rowing with a friend, a Hornet began sinking. A famous sailor came to our rescue. He helped us to temporarily caulk the Hornet seams with cotton, get us floating again, and had us promise that when we got to shore, we would use what he had shown us how to do, this caulking, to repair it so it would not founder again. The man's name was Captain Jim Stillwell, and he was reckoned one of the finest fore and aft sailors in America. It was the beginning of a lasting friendship. He taught me to sail aboard his schooner, the Fanny. There is Captain Jim Stillwell. His regular everyday profession, he was a ferry boat captain, and he was in charge of the ferry boat that would go from Staten Island to Manhattan and back to Staten Island again. But it was in his spare time, when he indulged his love of sailing, that he entered many international and local sailboat racing races. He was quite the enthusiast. I always felt as if I led a normal sort of life, but when I consider the people that I was meeting and rubbing shoulders with, I was most fortunate. My family were friends with Henry David Thoreau and with Ralph Waldo Emerson. They were often house guests of ours. Amongst my friends and classmates at Eagleswood were William Page, the artist, and soon to be partner with Matthew Brady, Louis B. Tiffany, who was soon to be famed for his design and stained glass work, and R.M. Colgate of the famous soap family, who would eventually make toothpaste. In a chance sailing off of Staten Island, I would meet William Brickell and his wife Mary, who would tell me of a place called Biscayne Bay. He would invite me on a sailing voyage down to Key West with a brief stop at Biscayne Bay. It was about to change my life, but not immediately. I had an immediate liking for Biscayne Bay and for the Coconut Grove area, but I would not move there immediately. Despite my fascination with Biscayne Bay and the wilderness of Coconut Grove, I returned to Great Kills, Staten Island, to carry on with my work and to establish a home. In 1879, I will marry Eva Amelia Hewitt. 2 years later, she will give birth to our daughter, Edith Munroe. We couldn't have been happier. This is my beautiful and beloved bride, Eva Amelia. Shortly after the birth of our daughter, we had terrible news. Eva was diagnosed with tuberculosis. To help her recover, we moved to Florida because of its healthier climate. We are joined by her sister, Adeline, who is also tubercular. Despite every effort on our part, both sisters will succumb to the disease. Distraught, I returned to Staten Island only to discover that my daughter Edith, being cared for by her grandmother, has died of influenza. Eva's grave is on the property where the Coconut Grove Library will be located. It is the oldest marked grave in Miami. Between 1882 and 1886, I will return to Biscayne Bay. I will spend my winters with Charles and Isabella Peacock. I will help them in the construction of the Bayview House. It is destined to become Dade County's first hotel. Its name will eventually be changed to the Peacock Inn. It is a popular destination for travelers. The Peacock Inn is expanded several times. I'm afraid it is not a wonder of architectural splendor, but it was a very practical place, and it was very popular with the travelers. A room is $10. and a sailboat can be rented for $2 a day. In 1886, I will make the decision to move permanently to Coconut Grove. I sell my house in Staten Island, and I purchase 40 acres of waterfront land for $400 and one of my sailboats, my favorite actually, the Kingfish. It is appraised at about $400 as well. So I purchased my 40 acres for about $800 altogether. First thing I do is I build a boathouse on the water's edge with living quarters on the second floor and a workshop on the first floor. I will also procure a salvage and wrecker's license because there on Biscayne Bay, there are many sandbars, there are reefs and there are rocks all along Biscayne Bay, and oftentimes ships will encounter them. Sometimes they strike hard and fast. And so wreckers can do very well in this area. Having become familiar with the waters of Biscayne Bay in particular, and the coastal shoreline of Florida in general, I begin designing yachts specifically suited to these waters. My most famous design is the one that I showed you earlier, the one called the Sharpies. Shallow drafted, flat bottomed with an adjustable centerboard, fast and stable and perfect for the waters of Biscayne Bay and South Florida. This is my favorite Sharpie, the Egret. She's 28 feet long and double-ended. Throughout my life and my career, I will design 56 sailboats, and I had blueprints for another 7 that were never built. Above is the Miko. It is a 50-footer, built in 1891, not down here in Florida, but up in Staten Island. It would set a record, 6.5 days from Biscayne Bay to Staten Island. She was a magnificent sailor, a very comfortable boat, and keep her around for many, many decades to come. In 1887, the citizens of Coconut Grove decided to establish the Biscayne Bay Yacht Club, and my boathouse will serve as the first clubhouse, and the club flag will be flown from my balcony. And that was when I was elected Commodore, probably because I provided the boathouse and the place for the yacht club. And it was a position that I would hold for over 22 years. We will purchase, as a yacht club, about a dozen small Hershoff sailboats for racing. As you may be aware, or maybe not, Nat Hershoff and his family are the finest maritime architects and yacht designers in the world. Not only do they design vessels like the America's Cup racers, but they also design smaller race boats, sailing boats. And those are the ones we purchased for our yacht club. There is my is the Biscayne Bay Yacht Club, and also my residence at this time, and my workshop as well. And from the balcony, as I mentioned, there is the pennant of the Biscayne Bay Yacht Club flying proudly. In the year 1891, I will begin construction of my house, my permanent house. I will call it the Barnacle. For any of you who have ever tried to scrape barnacles off the bottom of a boat, you know how difficult it is. When I built this house, I wanted it to stay and stay fast there. I never move in my lifetime. There is the Barnacle. When it was completed, it was built on a rock ledge. The central part of the house is octagonal. And it was a very comfortable house. And on the top, you'll notice on the top, there is like a little cupola. This was actually a venting system. It could be closed off or opened up to allow the heat within the house to rise up and out, very much like the old idea of the Greek houses, always with a central opening to allow airflow. In 1890, I would take on a new title and a position. I would become Justice of the Peace for this area, the Commodore Ralph Munroe Justice of the Peace. That's a mouthful. Around this time also, my friends and I established the Biscayne Manufacturing Company. It was built to the south of the Barnacle, and it was a place, it was a company that we built to employ and provide income from some of the people within our community, and it was very successful for a number of years. I would meet my second wife, Jessie Worth, on a cruise with friends in 1894. We would marry the following year, 1895. In 1900, we had a daughter, Patty, and in 1902, our son, Worth, was born. Also in 1902, the Peacock Inn would sadly close. To take up the slack, my friend Tom Hines and I would set aside some of my land, and we would create Camp Biscayne. There would be a main lodge and about a dozen small cottages, each cottage named for a type of plant or tree found on the property, i.e. the bamboo cottage, the oleander cottage, the palm cottage. And on the grounds, wherever one of these trees or plants was located, then we'd put a tag on it so people could associate the plant found in the wilderness of Coconut Grove and the name of the cottage. One of its guests over the years would become Alexander Graham Bell, perhaps because his daughter had married someone who was to become a local fellow, Dr. David Fairchild. The other famous person we had staying with us for many years was the American yacht designer that I mentioned earlier, Nathaniel Nat Hershoff. He had a special cabin set aside in his declining years. So there is Alexander Graham Bell, a man who invented the telephone, experimented in flight, amongst other things. And there is also the equally famous Nathaniel Nat Hershoff, the king of yacht builders. There's Camp Biscayne's main lodge and several of the cabins on the right. The cabin in the upper left, that cabin is the bamboo cottage, and the bamboo cottage would become the reading room and library for the camp. And it was set up to accommodate our guests. Originally, the Barnacle was designed as a one-story dwelling, but with our growing family, we needed more space. So we jacked up the entire house with railway jacks. We built a stone ground floor beneath it. While construction was taking place, we couldn't live in the house, of course, so our family lived in one of the Camp Biscayne cottages. The ground floor would be solid and the second floor would be cozy. We would eventually add to that, of course, a library and additional rooms adjunct to the building itself. This is what it looked like up on its rock ledge when it was completed. And there you see one of the added buildings to the side as well on the right. And this is the interior. This is the second floor, and the second floor contained the bedrooms, and the architecture was different. The attic was actually open, as you can see looking up, and those ropes that go up the ceiling, very much like a vessel, like halyards on a vessel. They were designed to be able to open and shut air vents on the roof itself. Some of the wood and the timbers used in this house was wood that I salvaged from some of the wrecks that we would occasionally work on off of Biscayne Bay. Both Patty and Worth were taught to swim, fish, and sail at an early age. They were also given daily chores to perform. We thought that sort of discipline was good for them. Each morning, they were to pick up all the limes that had fallen to the ground. To the south of the barnacle itself, we had a line of lime trees, and we had the children pick them up, because if they didn't pick them up, tourists coming along, many of them from Miami, when they would come along, they would ride along, and when they see the limes on the ground, they'd come out and pick them up and take them away for free. Well, our children were to go out very early and pick up all the limes. Likewise, they were to gather all the fallen coconuts. Now, I don't recall what it was they charged for limes, but I do know that the coconuts went for about 25 cents a piece. And they could then be sold to the tourists, and any proceeds from the sale of either limes or coconuts, that belonged to the children. Every morning, my children were also given the task of going out in the yard and gathering up my shoes and whatever else I threw at annoying mockingbirds that disturbed my sleep the night before. That was another one of their tasks. Here, Patty and Worth are, when they were very young, fishing from the break wall. Now, I cannot tell, because the head is cut off in this picture, I cannot tell if that is my wife, Jessie, or it might be her sister, Sarah Josephine, who came to live with us at the barnacle as well, and would help take care of the children. Some of the fish that were caught there were bigger than others. This shark obviously was not caught by the children, but of course it was a thing of great fascination to all the children in the area. It was also a reminder that swimming in the waters of Biscayne Bay, while it seemed like a paradise, had its dangers as well. Because I often made the children's presents, they were not allowed in the boathouse workshop for a few months prior to Christmas. This was a request of mine that they observed and honored, and made certain they wouldn't know what they were getting for Christmas ahead of time. Both of my children, as I mentioned, became terrific sailors. They often engaged in races with other people from the area and other children from the area. And frankly, with the father's pride, I can say my daughter, Patty, could beat all the boys. When Patty turns 18, I will build her a tea room, and she will manage that with a friend. It's called the tea chest. When her partner gets a better job, it proves too much for Patty to handle the place alone, so we end up selling the tea chest. The building will become, maybe a name familiar to you, it will become the Taurus. The barnacle was not your typical home. Life was laid back, casual, and mostly peaceful. But even in paradise, of course, there could be threats from time to time. You took it in stride and remembered you were living in a blessed place. But it was not that many years since the Seminoles had massacred local settlers, and they tried to burn down the Cape Florida lighthouse. Since that time, we learned to get along with them, and we trade with them, got to be friends with them. Jessie would even set aside food for them on a special shelf that we put into the barnacle. If we weren't in, if we were out on business, they could enter, take what they needed from that shelf. They were honest and industrious people, hardworking people. Nothing was ever taken that wasn't set out for them. Occasionally, we did have, like I mentioned, unwanted guests, like sharks that we caught earlier. Or here's a 14-foot alligator and a smaller one in front of it. But again, these were the exceptions. This was paradise and seemed like paradise, but it could be very dangerous as well. You'd have one of these 14-foot alligators wandering across your yard at any time. So if you had pets or young children, there could be a danger. This particular picture was taken on the beach for the Peacock Inn. But I think the greatest threat to the Coconut Grove way of life that we knew back then was success. Visitors loved Coconut Grove and Biscayne Bay. They came in droves, wanted to settle here. Our growth was unchecked. Part of that was due to our neighbors to the north, Miami, and the concerted effort to get Henry Flagler to bring his FEC railroad through Miami. At first, he resisted. Then he gave in to petitioners like Julia Tuttle. He built the massive Royal Palms Hotel on the north banks of the Miami River. The Royal Palms Hotel, you see here, first came the trickle of settlers, then the railroad, then the hotel, then all the people. The juggernaut of Miami is trying to absorb Coconut Grove. I fight to resist that. More people brings change, not always for the good. We wish to preserve a lifestyle that may already be doomed. Oh, don't get me wrong. I want people to see Coconut Grove and the wonders of nature down here. I want them to see and to enjoy Biscayne Bay and the waters here. I want them to see and enjoy all of it. I just don't want them all to move down here. If I may, I'd like to share a passage from my book with you. I think it sums up my feelings about change. There we go. I'll take these off to read. A few words on Florida's climate in the light of my long experience seems called for here. When Florida first dawned on the horizon of the North as a refuge from winter, the exploring enthusiast returned from its wilds, rivers, and beaches with extravagant tales of paradisic climate. Frost was unknown in the state. Gorgeous tropical flowers vied with strange fruit and incredible hordes of game and fish to make up a veritable fairyland of wonders, beauties, and delights, all basking in perpetual sunlight and breathed upon the perfumed, languorous trade wind. It was a wonderful picture, one result of which was a generation of the most barefaced real estate frauds known in this blue sky country. Throughout the following 50 years, one bubble after another has burst, sometimes absurdly, sometimes tragically, down to the Miami hurricane of September 1926, until one might be pardoned for asking if there were anything but lies in the oft-sung praise of the state. As a matter of fact, there is very little untruth. 50 years ago, frost was unknown in Jacksonville, and it have been for a generation, and the country around it was bowered in orange groves, brilliant parakeets and scarlet flamingos and roseate spoonbills, hordes of brilliant birds, unaccounted millions of egrets, to the incredibly crowded mass of bird life that made the whole peninsula an ornithologist's dream. While not even a feverish imagination could imagine and exaggerate the size, the number, the variety of game and food fish, which filled its varied waters almost to overflowing, that leapt to the crudest lure with a savage ferocity. Panthers were still to be found here. Wild turkeys were plentiful. Deer numerous, alligators and crocodiles of huge size filled every river and lagoon. Green turtles swarmed on the southern beaches and shoal water feeding grounds, and the cumbersome manatee was common. As usual, tourists took it for granted that these conditions were permanent and not to be affected by their puny efforts at shooting and fishing. Each St. John's River steamer carried a circle of sportsmen on her forward upper deck, armed with the latest repeating rifles and popping away at every alligator that showed its nose. Every cruiser collected bird skins, and the height of his ambition was to take home as many spoonbills, flamingos, and other rarities as he could get. Plume hunters often annually shot out the great rookeries of the South, killing literally millions of the dainty and harmless herons. The fish fared better for a time, for mere hook and line could hardly affect their numbers. But as markets became available, the destruction net came in, and in the last generation, it has done its fatal work among the shoal water fish. At the same time, the cruising purse netters offshore have pretty well swept the sea clean of menhaden and other small school fish, for everything that comes into their nets is nothing but oil and fertilizer to them, nothing more. And only recently are we coming to realize that these small fry were the food of the finer game fishes of the reef, and that the latter, with the extinction of their food, visit us no more. So now the big game is all gone. The brilliant birds, a half-forgotten memory. Most of the shoal water food fishes, including the luscious pompano and the sea trout, and to a certain extent, the Spanish mackerel, are rarities. The delicious green turtle is only a tradition. The manatee is dying out. The crocodiles, once so common in the brackish waters of the southeast coast that I have seen 20 at a time in Indian Creek. At the present, Miami Beach, and are nearly forgotten. And so it goes. It is, of course, the atmosphere, the flavor of these old times, which is of greatest significance in memory, which is hardest to preserve and reproduce. The bare facts of my early years on Biscayne Bay are of small moment to anyone, but as I look back, there is a color, a tone, a resonance, a life in those days and their doings, which is now unknown. Forgive the preaching, but change does happen. And too many people, of course, and too much building and destroying of the habitat changes the world. We used to be visited by millions of barn swallows on their annual migration every year, but with the clearing out of much of the area, the insects, the flies that they depended upon have become scarce, and when they arrived on an annual basis in those years, later years, well, they would hover around crying out, trying to find the flies that were their meal, what they depended upon for the strength to go further south. They would stay maybe for a day or two, continuing to fill the air, searching for the non-existent insects that had left because of the people, because of the clearing of the area, because of the change in climate, the chill that was now coming. I've known days in Coconut Grove where I've seen 1/4 of an inch of ice building up in some ponds. And these poor birds, without their food, they try to find some place for warmth during the night, hoping to renew their search for food the next day. And by the next day, most of them do not arise. And we have to go out with shovels to pick up all their poor little bodies, of course, and bury them. Change comes. It's not always for the good. Through all of this, I have indulged throughout my years here a passion for photography. And from my early days in Coconut Grove, Biscayne Bay, I have chronicled people, places, and events that have transpired throughout the years. The gentle people that have become lasting friends, the struggle to survive and in a challenging environment, and the sheer beauty of this tropical oasis. I use a Blair company camera. I have a smaller camera for taking pictures, especially when I'm on the water, and I develop all of my own photos. Ironically, when Coconut Grove was named Coconut Grove, there were only 2 coconut palms in the entire vicinity. That would change with time and also with difficulty. We would begin planting them. The fellow you see in that picture is another Munroe, no relation to me. His name is Kirk Munroe, and he was a writer and a conservationist. Many of us would get together and we would try to plant palms. Their roots take time to grab hold of the earth, and so oftentimes they were knocked down by storms, and we'd put them right back up again. Sometimes I like to pose my models artistically, juxtaposing the wild surroundings with an unusual pose. There are nights when I will stay up at night lying in bed thinking of how I might arrange a certain picture the following day. On the right, you have a woman who seems to be floating in the air. She's actually sitting on a fallen banyan branch playing the banjo. An unusual sort of picture, made more unusual by that floating effect. And the picture on the left, this young girl that I photographed reminded me of the young girls and her surroundings, reminded me of the Cottingley pictures from England. You may have seen them at some time or another, where these young Victorian girls claimed that they had seen fairies and little people wandering around, and they had captured photographs of them with the girls in surroundings much like the one you see there on the left. But mostly I like to record my sailboats underway, the people I met and worked with, the beauty and the power of nature itself. Gatherings at the Peacock Inn, many of the early settlers. The picture on the left, that is Dr. Tiger, a Seminole shaman on the left. The fellow holding his knee and sitting on the steps, that is Kirk Munroe again. A fellow writer and conservationist as well. Kirk was married to a lovely young woman named Mary, who was amazingly shy. If you look at that picture, see if you can pick out which person would be his wife, his shy wife, Mary. She's the one turning her head away from the camera. Coconut Grove in the early days had many colorful characters. I always regretted that I never got an image of my friend and fellow boat builder, Ned Pent. He was a skilled carpenter, and in addition to building fine boats, he was often called upon to build coffins, should the need arise, which occasionally it would. Ned was a man who also never turned down a drink. Never. He was discovered one morning slumped over his latest order. He'd obviously been drinking. It was a lovely coffin that he'd made, and the only one that was ever built with a centerboard for sailing. Here's a picture of the Cape Florida light. That was the light and the building, although the building's been replaced. that was the building that the Seminoles tried to, they did accomplish burning that down. They tried to burn down the lighthouse as well. They were not successful. And another rather moody picture of the Fowey light. In the early days, there weren't any markers out there, hence we had all the shipwrecks, but eventually they put up a light there. The Fowey light is over rocks that come up quite close to the surface and can certainly doom a ship if it doesn't observe the warning. This is a picture on the left of the mouth of the Miami River. In fact, where those palms are, that is where Mr. Flagler, Henry Flagler, built his Royal Palm Hotel, right at the mouth of the river. And the other picture that looks like a jungle, a tropical jungle, that's further up the river, back in the days before that land was developed. Biscayne Bay is mostly shallow. She kicks up easily. Squalls can be seen from a distance, but seldom outrun. And every so often, the unthinkable happens. September 11th, 1926. Most people, I believe, never saw a weather report. Might not have made a difference if they had. Those of us that knew the signs found it hard to overcome most people's complacency. When it struck hard. Hundreds of overseas railroad workers could not be rescued in time. Oh, they sent a train down to get most of them, take them out of harm's way, but it was delayed for needing repairs. And so it took a while to get down there. And when they finally picked them up, before they could turn around and come back with them, the hurricane of 26 struck. Most of the men drowned. And drowned at a place called Isla Morada. Because of its weight, the locomotive and its tender, that car that carries all of its coal, were the only parts of the train not washed off the tracks. They found bodies for months afterwards. Sturdy construction took a beating in the hurricane, but shoddy construction, which is often the result of very quick growth, rushed construction, didn't stand a chance. Hundreds died, many more were never found. At the Barnacle, we lost the boathouse, many years worth of designs, tools, and equipment, but those things could be replaced. The house was damaged, but Jesse and I were fine, and that was what was important. It was a setback, but we survived, and of course we would rebuild. Like balmy breezes, flamingos, and palm trees, hurricanes are a part of the Florida experience. It's not a case of if one will hit, but when and how hard. And in the interval between these hard lessons from nature, the wind is fair and there's good sailing to enjoy. I would continue sailing until I could no longer steady a tiller or ease a sheet. I would leave this world on August 20th in the year 1933 at the age of 82. If you wish to learn more about the early days, Coconut Grove and South Florida, Biscayne Bay, all of these things, early Miami, by all means, they are still available today, I understand. Pick up a copy of the Commodore's story, my book, written with Mr. Gilpin. And you can learn a great deal in far more detail than I could ever share with you in our brief time together. I thank you for joining me, and I hope that we will have the opportunity to meet again sometime and talk over old times on Biscayne Bay and early Coconut Grove. I thank you.
Thank you, Commodore Munroe. Robert,
hello.
Thank you so much. If anyone has any questions for Robert or for Commodore Munroe, please type them in the chat. So what do you think the Commodore would think of modern Coconut Grove in Miami?
He was against the vast growth of the city, so he would have been disappointed with the overgrowth of the area, but he loved that area in its early days and tried as hard as he could to preserve that. But as he mentioned, the juggernaut of Miami sort of took over, and development took over, and so we have a different Coconut Grove today. But the Barnacle is still there, and the Taurus is still there.
Yeah, and Biscayne Bay Yacht Club.
And the Biscayne Bay Yacht Club, exactly.
What did you find, most kind of interesting, illuminating as you learned about the Commodore?
I think the way that he took to this area, and as an early settler who just happened to have been introduced to the brand new technology of photography, he really served a great purpose down here by recording everything that he possibly could with his cameras and at the same time being one of those people, one of those early pioneers who helped to develop, to build the first hotel, to build some of the first structures, to also develop, like Kirk Munroe and others who came down here, a great interest in conservationism as well. And naturalism, having to learn about all of the plants that they were living amongst, and the introduction, of course, also of the coconut palms too, coconut growth.
Right. What was the social life like for the Commodore and his wife?
He and Jesse were both very social, and oftentimes when they would have guests at Camp Biscayne, they would invite them to the Barnacle for dinners. There was a lot of conviviality. There was also a lot of music. Patty mentions in her memoirs the fact that oftentimes after these meals, I think Jesse played possibly piano. Somebody played piano. The Commodore himself played flute, because when he was a young boy at Eagleswood Academy, the military academy, he had learned to play the fife. So the fife and drums, were part of it. So he learned to play the fife there. Easy transition to a flute, and the third person, whoever it would be, would normally play violin. So it was basically those three instruments. And his daughter Patty would lay awake at night in her room, right off the room where the music was, and listen to the music. And she said that she would weep because the music was so beautiful. So Jesse and Ralph Munroe were very, very sociable people, and there were many guests, coming over for dinner and for good conversation, and maybe some music as well.
And so, did the Commodore name the Barnacle the Barnacle?
Yeah. Oh, yes, definitely. And like I said, he compared it to the idea as a boat maker. Every boat maker knows that it is quite the task to try to scrape barnacles off. They hold tenaciously to the bottom of the boats, and he wanted that house to have that same tenaciousness and hold to the ground. And he built it on that rock ledge. And it has withstood. I mean, he mentioned the fact that the house was damaged. Well, in that hurricane of 26, when so much was wiped out, they lost some tiles on the roof, essentially. The boathouse was destroyed. He would rebuild that, and he would rebuild it with the front and the back wall, the wall facing the water, one opposite. Those were walls designed so they could break away. That when the storm and the surge came in and the waves came in, he would break them out, and he ended up adding guy lines down to the ground to secure the building itself, and it has lasted. The Miko, the 50-foot yacht sailboat that he designed, they kept it for decades, and in 1992, unfortunately, the hurricane of 1992 destroyed the Miko, and that was the last of all of the yachts that Ralph Middleton Munroe had designed.
Wow. Are there any Phyllis, may I ask a question?
Of course, go ahead.
Dear, it's Jane. This was wonderful. Thank you so much. I think those people who grew up in Florida can relate to similar stories of that ruining nature and that kind of thing. So I appreciate your appreciation of it. But are there any, is there a record of those photographs that he took? Because it sounds like he did take a lot of photos of birds, and that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. They have been archived. I'm not quite certain the location of some of them. There was a project, and I cannot remember the name of it offhand, but there was a project, and they did collect as many of those glass slides. And decades later, like in so many families, decades later, some of the glass plates were also, the glass slides were discovered up in an attic someplace. But the most of his photographs have been, and when he was alive, he was contributing the photographs not only to museums, places like that, but also to publications on early Florida. And so you can find a lot of his photographs in books and everything. The visual record of what was happening in the early days in Coconut Grove in its pioneering days. We owe a lot of that, a lot of the preservation of those images to Ralph Middleton Munroe.
So you think it just by researching a little bit, we could find the photos?
I would start with the Miami History Museum. They have archive rooms there, and I'm pretty sure that they probably have some of his photos as well.
I think a lot I've also found.
If they have Audubon, John James Audubon's original paintings and papers, I'm pretty sure they've got a good collection of Ralph Middleton Munroe's photographic work.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Robert.
My pleasure.
Gonna turn it over to Betsy.
Okay.
Hi, I'm committee member Betsy Tillman. Thank you, Robert Dawson, for your fascinating portrayal of Commodore Ralph Munroe. We were captivated by the way you brought our Florida pioneer to life, how he experienced this frontier land. I hope that the several Commodore's relatives who have joined us today enjoyed this story of their adventurous and thoughtful relative and the role he played in early Coconut Grove. Thank you, Robert. There is no better way to be educated and entertained than spending an hour with you. All of the Colonial Dames, I'm going to sign off right here. I'm going to let you see this little form. All of the Colonial Dames, thank you, our listeners, for joining us today. We hope you have enjoyed yourselves. This is our second year of presenting our fundraising programs through Zoom. We hope to be back in person next year. This is fun, but there is nothing better than the warmth of personal contact and catching up with friends and acquaintances. And like last year, we have 4 great door prizes, which we will momentarily be picking through a computer-generated random drawing. Trust me, they are doing this drawing at the national level. If you are my friend and get a prize, that is just random good luck. But first, and as a last request, we ask you to consider a donation, which will allow us to continue assembling care boxes for our servicemen abroad and to help maintain our NSCDA historic homes. Donating is easy. You can look for an email of thanks and an opportunity to help. Thank you. And now for our computer-generated random door prize winners. If you are a winner, you will receive your winning notification by email, although I'm going to give you the names right here, where we're asking you to respond with your address and your name so that we can send you your prize. Okay, I'm supposed to be getting the winners on my little sheet here. Let's see. I don't have them. National. Oh, here we go. Our winners today, and I think we need one more, are Molly Bomberger, Teresa Zahn, and Joyce Nelson, and Francis Hansford. Congratulations, you all. Thank you again. And thank you for joining us today. We hope next year we'll be live in person, and we hope to see you then. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Goodbye for now.